Namaskar. Thank you for joining us here on our weekly program on geoeconomics. Today we'll discuss the Indian economy in the light of yet another positive rating. This time Fitch has upgraded India's medium-term potential growth estimate from 5.5% to 6.2%. Fitch has also reduced China's growth estimate from 5.3% to 4.6%. Fitch says that the estimates for India and Mexico have been upgraded because of factors like a better capital to labor ratio. India is seeing a swift recovery in labor force participation rates. To discuss this, we have with us two eminent economists. Let me introduce you to them. Professor Manoj Pant is the former Vice Chancellor at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, and Dr. Charan Singh is the CEO of eGrow Foundation. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Professor Pant, Fitch now sees great potential in India's economic momentum. This time it's talking about labor force participation. Does this point to, job creation?
Possible, but again, the data that we have on labor is largely taken from the PLFS, periodic labor force surveys. And the issue, it doesn't really cover a lot of the informal sector, but there is a relationship. It's generally true that if formal labor goes up, informal labor should also follow. But yes, it does indicate certainly trade creation in the formal sector. The informal sector, we don't know as much about it yet, but I think there would be a positive impact there too. Yes.
Dr. Charan Singh, KV Subramanian, who's India's IMF director, he points to a periodic labor force survey, and he says that the number of regular employees and salaried workers has risen substantially. 13 crores is what it currently is now. What are the reasons for this? Dr. Charan Singh, you're not able to get us? Okay, we'll get back to Dr. Charan Singh. I think we are not able to get through to him. Dr. Manoj Pant, would you like to take that question, sir?
Yeah, he's right. But again, as I said in my earlier part, he's referring largely to formal labor. And there's no doubt about that, he's looking at the organized regular employment, which is true. It has grown, there's no doubt about that. Issue is what happens to the informal sector. Let me give a number. If you take the total MSMEs in India, 99% of those MSMEs are micro industries. Now, we don't have any data. I'm not saying that they're not getting employed, but the data that he's giving largely relates to the formal sector. We don't know what's happening in the informal sector, and that's a must. The government has not done any survey of the informal sector since NSSO survey of 2014-15. I think only if they update that will we know what's happening to this sector. But I do think growth in general does have some positive impact, even on the informal sector. We don't really know how much quantitatively.
Indeed. Hopefully we've got through to Dr. Charan Singh. Dr. Charan Singh, can you hear me? We were still not able to get our audio link connected with Dr. Charan Singh. Professor Pant, in October, the World Bank had noted that India's resilience was underpinned by, robust domestic demand, strong public infrastructure investment, and also the strengthening of the financial sector. What's your assessment?
I agree with them. There's no doubt about it. The only positive spots in the world today, frankly, are the US and India. And that's not just got to do with our potential. It's got to do with the fact that we are both of us have really a very large and growing till 2040 at least, the labor force from the 15 to 40 age group, which is the working labor. Now, China is exactly the opposite. They've just gone through a recession of real estate, and at the same time, their labor force is declining. So both these things are hitting China. So it's really a case of, let me put it very simply, forget the GDP figures. Where can demand grow? Where there are people, right? If there are no people, there's no demand. That's where the people are growing, are in these two countries. And that's why we can see today the two bright spots in general in the world in terms of growth rates are both India and USA. So that is true. That's really what this Fitch is saying. that the future prospects, the
Mm-hmm.
absolute value of the Chinese economy is still much larger than the Indian economy, much larger. There's no comparison. But the growth potential seems larger in India because China is now slowing down from what they were in 2019 or just before the. So if you're slowing down, then the incremental demand is falling. Even though the total demand may be large, incremental demand is falling, and companies work on the basis of new demand. They don't work on the basis of total demand. And that seems to be happening in India and USA. So they are right about that. That's what the reason for why they are positive on India as a future developing market, not necessarily the alternative to the world. That's not true. But certainly as a future growth market, India is certainly a good bet.
Okay. Professor Pant, we'd have to continue with you because we're not able to establish an audio link with Dr. Charan Singh. So,
Okay.
JP Morgan also had forecast that the size of the Indian economy is going to double to $7 trillion by 2030. So, the question is, I mean, even if it's that large, shouldn't it be manufacturing that should be contributing at least 25%? Exports should be rising to about $1 trillion. Do you see that happening?
The manufacturing sector, I think the government's taking some useful steps. The PLI, which is a short-term measure, it's not long-term, it's a very good step. I mean, something required. Hopefully that will work. But at the moment, whether we can push the manufacturing sector of the 15, 16%, 25 awaits, it awaits a lot of things. One of the things that awaits is what happened in the world economy. Now, if you look at India in the last 6 months, 23, the growth rate of total trade has been about 800 billion. It's been total trade, not growth, total trade. That means we're looking at a $1.6 trillion total trade in 2023, which is down from 2022. So this is not the fault of the Indian economy, it's the fault of the world economy. The world economy has been slowing down. There was a temporary impetus after coming back from the of the pandemic. But since then, the pandemic positive effect post-pandemic is over, and we are now going back to the stagnant world trade that is there. Unfortunately, what is growing in the world market is not trade in manufacturing or goods, but trade in services. And there you can see India is actually doing extremely well. I don't remember the exact numbers, but services are equaling now manufacturing trade or commodity trade in the total. And that's a good thing, but the dangerous part is services trade switches very quickly. Services doesn't require any address. It switches very quickly. Manufacturing is a much more stable source of growth.
Right.
So I do believe India must push to make sure more manufacturing growth takes place within the country for the local economy, not the trade economy.
Professor Pant, Fitch also says that China is, it's reducing it's downgrading China because they're saying that it has a weaker outlook for employment rate and also decreased expectations for deepening capital over the next 5 years. How serious are China's concerns long term?
I think quite serious. Not just China, but let's be honest, for the global economy. China was 20% of the global economy, right? That's not a small thing. So if China starts contracting, they are not. They are slowing down, but they're not contracting. But if China contracts, I don't see who's going to make up for it. India is not big enough to make up for China's contraction. I don't think that should happen from the global point of view. It's also going to affect the Indian global market. But why they are saying they're negative is because China is now slowing down, which means they're not growing. They're not contracting yet, but instead of growing at 8, 10%, they are now going at 4, 5%, which probably next year will become 3% till a point of time when they stop growing. And as I said, investment is based on the growth. It does not depend on the absolute amount. You don't make cars because you already have 20 million cars. You make cars, manufacturers make cars because there are 2 million new demand. So this new demand is missing in China, and which is why I think Fitch is right. And really, I think what Fitch is basing it on is that China has had a very long, domestic consumption boom, which has been fed by a lot of, I think fairly liberal bank loans, and the real estate sector has now collapsed, as we know that very well. Now, the real estate sector, when it collapses, for some time the economy is going to take to adjust to it.
Right.
Question really is that China can actually be helpful to the world if it starts buying from the world. Instead of building up these huge $3.5 trillion reserves, reserves are useless, right?
Right.
Reserves are like taking away savings from the global economy. China must learn to buy from the world economy, start being a buyer instead of trying to always sell to the world economy. I think that's what China will start doing once they start generating demand within the economy. So they're
Sure.
going to have to start buying from the world. It'll be good for them. It'll be great for the for the world economy. But
Uh,
they are right. Fitch
sure.
at the moment, negative rating is perfectly justified. One more I must mention is their debt. No
Okay.
one has built up. There's nothing wrong with debt, global
Right.
debt. It's very high, but they've built up the debt over a very short period, which is very dangerous. That's
Sure.
the problem.
Uh, Professor Charan Singh has also joined us. Thank you, Dr. Charan Singh. Sorry that we had a bad connection with you to start with. But, if we go back, we've covered a few points, but let me tap your brains for, some of these points that we've covered as well. One is that employment seems to be one of the reasons why India is doing well. What do you think? I mean, what are the reasons for India's seeing higher numbers in terms of employment?
See, there are a couple of things on employment that's being discussed now numerous times in the media also. The most important thing is the data which came out from PLFS, and I think that's the right place to go for employment. That is showing a very positive trend. And you must have seen the interview which was given by the former chief economic advisor and now the executive director at the IMF in Washington, where he is doubted the methodology adopted by CMI. Now, CMI data has just been released last week also, which showed that the employment figures are not very robust. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the PLFS data, the PLFS data is showing a very positive trend, very positive trend. Now, if you look at the PLFS data in terms of female labor force participation, you see a jump there. If you look at the PLFS data for overall labor force participation, there's a jump there. I can read the data for you. The labor force participation, according to PLFS data, increased from 50% in 17-18 to about 58% in 22-23, which is a
Okay.
substantial jump. And the worker population ratio also registered similar significant increases. Now the
Yes.
issue is that when you have a country which is very, very young, the demographics is very, very positive, and you are seeing the positive employment trend that is emerging, obviously then the confidence levels go up. Now, where all could this positive trend be coming from? That's the issue. The issue is that in the last few years, you have seen the startups, the Make in India, the startup culture, and you have also noticed that even during COVID, there
Yes.
have been support given to employment. The Mudra loans have been there. There have been loans even for the people who do head load work and the cart work. Therefore, employment generation has been maintained properly in the system. The
Yes.
other way of looking at it is the Manrega. If you look
Yes.
at the expenditure under Manrega, that's been coming down. So people, if the unemployment was so high, Manrega would be high. But
Okay.
when you find that Manrega expenditure is coming down, that obviously means people are getting
Getting
absorbed in the
regular
labor force
employment.
somewhere. So
Yes, absolutely.
PLFS data looks more reliable in this case.
Indeed.
Given the young
Sure.
demographic India, obviously this is a very positive trend. And Fitch is right in saying that they see very positive trend in India.
Yes, Dr. Charan Singh, also in terms of, JP Morgan had said that India would be a $7 trillion economy by 2030. But we're concerned about how far manufacturing will contribute to that, because that's the employment generator to some extent. And also exports, if it has to be up to $1 trillion. What do you think? I mean, do we have the capacity to reach those figures?
So there are a couple of things that I would like to share here. One is the country is now way ahead of COVID. So let's accept that. And therefore, I see a big jump in manufacturing taking place. And what are the reasons? I look at again the young demographic India. I look at the startup culture. I look at what the incubation centers are doing. So therefore, I feel that the MSME sector is going to perform exceedingly.
Okay.
MSME sector also has a very good role in the export sector. As far as the global economy is concerned, as you know, it's been sagging all across the world. Growth projections for the rest of the world, even till 2028, are very, very
Yes.
conservative. I would rather say very, very low. Fitch has also done it even now in front of you, which was as expected. India will play a very important role in exports given this situation and the manufacturing. Now,
Okay.
the Russia-Ukraine war and also the certain other violence and other things which is creating uncertainty in the global economy, India is poised to be a very comfortable economy. Whereas uncertainty implicates growth
Okay.
and manufacturing, disrupts supply chain. India is a large economy, and without getting disturbed on any of these things, it has the capacity to produce. So to
Sure.
me, manufacturing will continue to be good, MSMEs will do better, and even under the worst scenarios, given the PLS scheme that we had achieved record high exports. So
Okay.
I am not too worried on
Sure.
exports, despite there's a slight slowdown in the global economy.
Dr. Charan Singh, we've now started talking about China. Professor Pant had given us his views on why China should be downgraded. But you know, China's economic managers think that they are going to be able to achieve their annual growth target of 5%. US, Europe, and Australia are now re-establishing their economic ties with China. Do you see China being able to produce more? Or, you know, are there some systemic issues there?
I'll be very honest in my assessment with you, brutally honest. I would like to mention that China has been a very suspect case for nearly 2 decades now. Most of the time, their growth data, their non-performing assets, their bank's performance has always been camouflaged. Nobody knew what the reality is. It is coming back to bite them. Secondly, within China, there has been some economic policies, especially the one-child policy to the three-child policy, that is certainly going to start showing fiscal implications of those policy measures. So I don't see China recovering that fast. The third,
Okay.
the infrastructure that they have built, the empty houses that they have in large numbers, they have been depreciating, and I don't think there is any scope of recovery on that account that's going to suffer.
Okay.
Fourth, the performance of China vis-a-vis the global economy and its positioning that it has done in the last 3 years. For COVID, there was certain setback that China had. I don't deny the fact that, well, the number of 9 lakh 60 odd thousand foreign companies were operating in China before COVID set in. I don't think many of them have relocated totally stock and barrel, but the message has gone, and therefore there have been alternative production facilities which have been explored, be it
Okay.
Vietnam, be it Bangladesh, be it some parts of Estonia and other countries. I don't think they're going back to China. The geopolitics that has happened in the recent past, China has not played a sterling role in that either. India has played a very, very sterling role. So therefore, to my mind, I don't think the recovery that Chinese economy managers are claiming that life will be back to usual will be back to usual, as
Okay.
the world
Fair
is
enough.
extremely unforgiving in these matters, and economic issues matter a lot. China for 3 years, and before that its monopoly power, and through its exchange rate manipulation and the foreign exchange reserves that it built up, not through very ethical means, the
Okay.
world has a memory of that. So to me,
Fair
I
enough.
think China has done enough of harm to its own self, and I don't see that days will be back to the glorious days that China enjoyed before COVID.
Okay, fair enough. Professor Pant, you know, much is being made of the meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden that's going to take place at the APEC summit. It's taking place from the 15th through the 17th of November. What do you think of this APEC or APEC as a forum?
See, it's like this. APEC is not really still an economic forum. It's a political forum. It's not an agreement between country state. Try to understand, and I'm repeating what I said earlier. It's one thing to say, I may or may not like China, etc., which I don't, because I agree with with the other commentator that they are manipulated. But the fact remains, they are 20% of the world economy, and we are 2.5 in terms of commodity. And it is unlikely that we are going to be able to replace them in the world economy the next 5 to 6 years. Not going to happen. Now, from the US point of view, China is the largest trade partner. You just look at the value of the electronic goods which China supplies to the USA. Can that be replaced? Not at all. What is happening, and that's where India has to actually look in. Don't think in terms of growing the world market. It's not going to grow. India has to find that the world finds that China is a possible political risk. Now, China is not as much of an economic renegade as you think it is. Try to understand. China has not violated a single US sanction on Russia, not one. So China would itself like to make peace with the US because their own future depends on the growth of the US economy.
Okay.
I do believe that China and US will come to a rapprochement, but businessmen have understood
All right.
that there are political changes happening. So maybe it's a good thing to diversify. It's the diversification that we should welcome and say, let's get our act together. Our infrastructure movement has been enormous. Without that, your
Sure.
manufacturing go nowhere.
Okay.
That's what we should look at instead of saying that China will disappear. China not going to disappear in the next 5 years. And if China disappears in the next 5 years, we are in for another very serious global recession. Let's face it.
Sure.
But it's a great opportunity for India to become a way, remember, many people left China, they were looking at Vietnam. Vietnam's got all the benefits which each China. But India has to get its act together. India has a better alternative to Vietnam.
Vietnam.
But it is not an alternative yet that China will disappear, India will appear. I don't think that's true. See, 5%.
And neither was I, saying that, but because the Chinese economy is much larger currently. But Dr. Charan Singh, if we look at the global economy, a Reuters poll of 200 economists has said that high inflation is going to be a major concern next year for the world economy. What impact will it have on India?
Mark, I would like to, if you allow me, I would like to add a few thoughts on what Professor Pant has just mentioned. Nobody is saying that China can fade away from the global economy. Neither did UK after America took over. Neither did Japan after it was number 2 economy. Nobody is saying that China will fade away. All I'm trying to tell, or all I'm trying to drive home is that ill-gotten wealth, ill-gotten position has now been recognized by the global economy and global powers. Therefore, China has played its role. Whatever it has done, but not fair that the world has recognized. India, to that extent, has played a very fair role the world has recognized. You could see the exuberance and the strength that G20 showed us. It was, to me, a very important lesson. The world view about country changed after G20, and the fact that we are bidding for an Olympic, the view has changed again. That is the point I'm making. India has arrived. I'm not saying China is going to fade away. I'm also not denying that China is a $13 trillion economy against $3 trillion of mine and 21 of America. Those facts are known to us. But all I'm saying is that, like Japan had to, when America told it that there are certain things which has to be respected. That's one thing. As far as the inflation is concerned, as you have noticed, the supply disruptions and the global value chain disruptions haven't really mended themselves properly. The first war in Europe after 75 years is still raging there. Rather, another huge issue has raised in the Middle East now. How long and what all will happen? Positions are tightening, hardening every day. So I'm not surprised if the oil still misbehaves and gold misbehaves, and therefore the fear of inflation continuing into the next year is certainly there. Now, recent interviews by the Fed chairman show he's in no mood to reduce the interest rates. The very fact that he says he's in no mood to reduce the interest rates are a clear signal that there is something happening on inflation. So therefore, I'm with it. I totally agree with that understanding that inflation will continue to be high at least till half of the next year.
Professor Pant, on a global level, do you see any movement towards fiscal consolidation returning, or is this going to be just monetary tightening, as Professor Charan Singh is also suggesting?
No, I think here he's right. On that, he's right. We do see some monetary tightening, mainly because the US economy is still a very driving force in the world economy, and they feel the inflation is due to monetary loosening, which they did. They lent a lot of money, or they're trying to get money back, which they had lent quite indiscriminately to the people. There was a lot of money was handed out. But I don't think inflation in the global economy is going to be much of an impact for India. Try to understand. Indian economy's inflation, I don't know when RBI will understand that, is still a function of the agricultural commodities. there is no serious inflation in non-agricultural commodities. And I don't understand why they keep raising the interest rates
Okay.
every time. Any sector, you ask any sector, anything they tell you, they'll say our problem is high interest rate. You can't have an economy with an 8 or 9% rate of interest rate. If you do that, then inflation will climb back to 6%. I don't know how they will do it. I think they
Yes.
keep it they're too
Yes.
scared of foreign exchange leaving. But I think RBI has to relook at its approach to inflation. I think it is wrong.
Okay.
India's inflation is supply side, not demand side. And nothing says that raising interest rate will help supply side inflation when it's driven by agricultural economy. So I
Sure.
don't think inflation is the worry for India.
Right.
Certainly.
We've run short of time. Dr. Charan Singh, a quick word from you. It's clear that India has key advantages. Domestic demand is good. Consumer loans are increasing. Banks are reporting decent profits. SBI, in fact, recently reported an 8% increase in net profit July-September quarter. Is there anything that India should be concerned about?
Just don't burst too many Diwali crackers. Pollution can be harmful. We are on a very good growth trajectory. We have to just maintain that level.
Okay, we leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Charan Singh and Professor Manoj Pant. Thank you for enlightening us on this interesting subject of Fitch's rating, upgrading India and downgrading China. In conclusion, let's say this, that, in October, the World Bank had also said that India will continue to show resilience against the backdrop of the challenging global environment. And in the same month, the other Bretton Woods institution, that's the IMF, had in October raised India's GDP projection to 6.3% while slashing global growth forecast to 3%. So among the key positives that India has seen is that job growth has risen among females with a 29.4% increase compared to an 8% increase in males. So this is a clear step forward, at least towards gender parity. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.